Aeterno is my favorite single episode of the entire show, and in this analysis I will cover the episode and where the backstory of Magnus Hanso, the captain of the Black Rock, came from, a bit of troublesome history regarding the writer's room, and the construction of the statue, how it was built, who it really depicts, how it was broken, and much more. When Aeterno aired, I ended up writing a 12,000 word analysis, the longest I had done in Norwegian, with the headliner, "I have never felt a lost episode being so cinematic since the pilot." With the pilot having the excitement of a Spielberg film combined with many other influences, this episode was like a Spanish epic with a blockbuster budget and an emotional core. At least that was my immediate reaction, a giddy 19-year-old nerd who was completely blown away. Seeing Richard in prison was like seeing Edmond Dantes imprisoned in the Count of Monte Cristo. Seeing Richard Alpert walk by the beach towards the statue was like watching Charlton Heston walking along the beach towards the statue in the Planet of the Apes. Jonas Whitfield and some of the boat scenes reminded me of Master and Commander or even 1492, so I was completely blown away, and I still am. Let's start with the story of the Black Rock and its captain Magnus Hanso. He was part of the Danish Hanso family, whom we first learned about in season 2, both through the orientation film in the episode Orientation as well as on the blaster map. Alvar Hanso being the financial backing of the Dharma Initiative, as well as Magnus Hanso being his great-grandfather. The majority of his backstory was revealed in the alternate reality game The Lost Experience and the bonus featurette Mysteries of the Universe. However, the Hanso family was rarely mentioned on the show. The same goes for the Dharma founders Karen and Gerald de Groot. At the end of season 2, Lost put more focus on another wealthy businessman, Charles Widmore. While in terms of Dharma leadership, Lost gave us Horace Goodspeed instead. They didn't even mention the Groots, they always mentioned Ann Arbor.
Either we make a decision, or I call Ann Arbor. And they make it for us.
The Hanso family was just background material, mostly of interest to the hardcore Lost fans on the forums, put aside in favor of other characters. It was even made abundantly clear in Aeterno, when no one was cast in playing Magnus Hanso. He wasn't seen, only mentioned twice, and the character we got to know was Jonas Whitfield, which sparked more theories on whether or not he was related to Charles Widmore, the individual that the Lost writers were more interested in exploring, with him being British and with a similar name. I'll put on a theory cap and say that the reason is likely something from behind the scenes. The Lost writers' room, which was uncovered as not being a very happy place, had a lot of writers come and go throughout the years. Some voices sparked new energy into the show and some voices left the show. Here's the writing team in February 2004, when they were working on both the pilot as well as brainstorming ideas for future episodes and seasons. And then the writers team was expanded. You can see that they have some newcomers like Eddie, Adam and David Fury, as well as Carlton Cuse, who helped run the show with Damon. Most of the people who were there from the beginning had already left by the end of season 1 or season 2. A vital member was Javier Grillo-Marxuach.
All of these ideas were discussed within a small group of writers that were hired by Abrams and Lindelof, namely Jennifer Johnson, Javier Grillo-Marxuach, Paul Dini, and Christian Taylor. Johnson had previously written for the teen show MTV Undressed. Grillo-Marxuach, by contrast, was more familiar with fantasy and science fiction shows like Sequest or Charmed.
Who left the show at the end of season 2, and he was the guy who infused the show with those nerdy esoteric elements like Alvar Hanso.
The show has a very thick and complicated mythology that includes the Dharma Initiative, Alvar Hanso, the numbers, the hatches, the shark, all of this other stuff.
After all, he was the creative force behind the Lost Experience.
Welcome to the Hanso Foundation, where you can experience all of the social and scientific endeavors we are pioneering to make your world a better place.
And one of the last things he did on the show was the blaster map. In 2015, he talked a little bit more about it.
Even though I continued to play a key role in the development of series concepts such as the history of the Dharma Initiative, the first Dharma training film was part of Orientation, which I co-wrote with Craig Wright, and much of my work during the second season involved fleshing out the Dharma Initiative's origins, discerning the meaning of the numbers, planting the Valenzetti equation firmly in series canon, and create a narrative for the work of the Hanso Foundation, both for the series and for a massive transmedia project called The Lost Experience. I was repeatedly told that my individual voice as a creator of story, character, and dialogue was becoming too idiosyncratic for the current direction of the show. On February of 2006, I resigned.
And the show was more interested in the more spiritual and religious explorations. That's also been true since the beginning, with the word magic being brought up as early as White Rabbit. And it also fits thematically with what the show was really about. I'm happy with how it all turned out, but in light of Maureen Ryan's Burn It Down, power, complicity, and a call for change in Hollywood, and seeing as there were a couple of more dominant voices in the writer's room, with Dalton being this almighty force that propelled the toxic and racist tones of the writer's room, we might look at it a little bit differently. I would consider losing Javi a downfall. He was a very clear voice in the big picture in season 1 and 2. Many interviews about Lost featured him, as well as him being a very active voice on the Fuselage, the enormous fan forum.
There's a whole core group of fans that have formed around the Fuselage, which is a Lost posting board fan community that formed very shortly after the show began to air.
Before the popularity of the Lost podcast and the whole Dalton image, he was active in fan engagement, more so than them, and when the story got published, Javi was described as the only person from the show's original nucleus of writers still in the writer's room in season 2. Writers were uncomfortable, especially regarding how they handled Aeterno and Adewale Akinnuoye. The latter is a little bit more complicated situation compared to Harold, who was a big fan of the show, his character, and even returned to the show after he got killed off. In a perfect world, the writer's room would be much more inclusive to the various ideas. And I will also talk a little bit about this in next week's episode, about some ideas that would strengthen the show, because I really miss Javi's input to the show. I think he was a very valuable member, especially in how he communicated with the fans and all those esoteric ideas that he had. And I think his input, if he was there in season 5, maybe even in this episode, would be very interesting. But why am I bringing up Maureen Ryan's book in here, in Aeterno? Well, the episode was highlighted there as well. A lot of us fans were surprised before the episode aired, including the 19-year-old me, that the upcoming Richard Alpert backstory would not be written by Dalton. It was written by Melinda and Gregg, an episode that would get rave results and be one of the most critically acclaimed episodes of the show. Melinda was so grateful for her and Gregg's job on the episode and was thunderstruck when Carlton Cuse was bragging about how he wrote most of that script.
I mean, it was a flat-out lie, Sue Taylor said. My jaw dropped. I just turned around and walked away. She was devastated. At one point, the Aeterno saga took a turn for the ridiculous. Cuse and Lindelof called Nations and Sue Taylor into a room, and she recalled that they basically told us how much we owed them for letting us have our names on that script. And they implied it would probably be good if we got them a little present. So Sue Taylor went out and bought gifts for her bosses. As the episode got more and more praise, they started to get more and more tense about it, Sue Taylor recalled. I was up next in the rotation. I was supposed to write one of the upcoming episodes. We were in the writer's room. I remember Carlton walking around the table while doling out script assignments. Sue Taylor recalled feeling that he was making sure everyone was fully aware that he was skipping her. Later, when the bosses weren't around, the other writers were sympathetic, she told me. They were like, yes, you're absolutely being punished for having co-written that script.
Absolutely horrible, and this surprised me too. I re-listened to the audio commentary for Aeterno after this article came out, recorded by Melinda, Gregg, and Nestor Carbonell, and it didn't seem like there was anything bad going on, with Melinda giving compliments to Damon and Carlton. However, with what the other writers have said, it really did seem like things were not going that well. So I would just offer my complete praise to Melinda and Gregg for creating this fantastic episode. I would also give a shout out to Javi for creating a bit of backbone with the Hanso family. I mean, that guy is the man behind the Blaster map, which is one of my favorite things on the show, and my most watched Lost Journeys episode, and was the first mention of Magnus Hanso, the captain of the Black Rock.
This is your lucky day. Thank you, Father. This man is now the property of Captain Magnus Hanso.
So to create a timeline for Magnus, we have to piece together things ourselves, with a very small amount of information we have, which was mostly Javi's material, that luckily Melinda and Gregg respected. I think it's very likely that Hanso's original name was something like this, Hanso. Seeing as he owned the Black Rock, he probably moved to England and changed his surname to remove this Scandinavian letter. As someone with an Ö in my name, this happens all the time to me on travel documents abroad. His ship was trading gold as well as mining equipment around the world, operating in the black market since slavery was abolished. They got Ricardo here at the Canary Islands and he boarded the ship. That means the island was likely in the Atlantic Ocean in the 1860s. They entered the island bubble during the daytime. If you believe that the Black Rock sailors were part of the outrigger chase, then this event needs to transpire. I am not a subscriber to this theory, but mention it nonetheless. At this point in time, Man in Black has arrived on the beach, and they both look at the ship. The question many people have posed here is, why is it daytime and calm seas here and nighttime and a tremendous storm here? To me, this answer is simple. This event happened during the day, and this happened several hours later in the middle of the night. It's not like it suddenly turned into night. Magnus Hanso and Jonas Whitfield saw the giant statue at the beach and assumed this was a place with a civilization. There was no place near the statue to dock, so they kept sailing around the island to find a dock. They probably assumed that this was inhabited. If the Black Rock Journal is true, that they could spot Jacob and Man in Black from all over here, probably through a maritime telescope, then surely there would be a dock and a village somewhere. The ship sailed around the whole island to see if there were any places to dock, but no luck. There were no signs of any civilizations, and they looked through their maps and could not find out what this place was, so they would turn around to the only man-made structure they saw. By the time they had turned around this corner, it was nighttime, and a storm was brewing. A really bad storm too. By the time they had reached this western part of the island, facing the statue, the waves were so high that they lifted the entire ship, probably like 50 meters up in the air. I tried to see how tall the statue was. In the 2006 official Lost podcast, they said roughly 75 meters. But that's years before they actually made a model and showed it on screen. By using the measurements of the doors seen in the season 5 finale, I made this measurement, and it seems like the statue is around 54 meters tall. It's still impressive, especially for that age, being almost twice the size of the Colossus of Rhodes, and if the island was a known place, this would likely be one of the 7 wonders of the world. What's even more impressive is the size of the wave. I tried to search for waves that were as big as this, and that's not something that happens in the ocean. Not at this size. It's been studied, and they typically don't reach more than 30 meters. It needs to be a mega tsunami caused by an eruption or a landslide, like the Lituya Bay mega tsunami in 1958, where a block fell almost vertically and hit the water with sufficient force to create a wave that surged up the opposite side of the head of the bay to a height of 520 meters. That's much taller than the Empire State Building, and was still many tens of meters high further down the bay. I do think that at some point Hydra Island was connected to the main island, but I think that rupture happened a long time ago. I also think that if it created a mega tsunami in 1867, it would destroy the temple. I think a landslide probably happened on this side. Maybe a huge chunk of this part of the island fell into the ocean. So during the storm, when the Black Rock was here, the landslide propelled into a mega tsunami that probably destroyed whatever this rock over here was. It might have been a house, the rock with a hole in it. But it also made the Black Rock rise up to ridiculous height. The wave completely swallowed the entire statue, crushing it to pieces, and in such a way paved the way for the Black Rock to sail down the mountains, as ridiculous as it sounds down here. The statue's head hit the mountain behind it, and then it tumbled down into the water along with the rest of the body. The statue stood there for a long time. I wonder how the Egyptians constructed it. Either they created a structure around it and built it kind of like this, carrying stone up using rope, obviously a project that took many years to complete, or maybe they built it on the ground and this area was not eroded.
This can't be normal. The tide shifting so suddenly, rising in so short a time.
There's a lot not normal around here. The rate this beach is eroding, the fuselage is going to be underwater in a matter of days.
We need to get all this stuff off the beach before nightfall.
This was a large, flat grass field and they used tons of rope to help it into place. The idea for this came to me after seeing The Prince of Egypt, where they erect a statue like this in the same manner. I like both of these solutions, just comparing it with the Colossus of Rhodes, where Chares, the sculptor behind this impressive statue, used iron beams and frames to help it stand. I think that was the case here too. I think that the base could be like this, with the iron beams going into the stone walls. Here's Jacob's chamber in the middle. Because if the statue was standing on an open room like this, it would be crushed immediately. Jacob's chamber is much smaller than we think. The Egyptians carved the whole statue. I also think that they either used limestone or granite. Limestone is notable for its easy workability and relative softness. The ease with which limestone could be worked made it ideal for sculpture. In fact, limestone is likely the first stone used for sculpture within Egypt. It could also be granite, which is found everywhere. It's a material with high density and compressive strength, and used extensively for sculptures. After it has been cut and polished, the stone gets a beautiful polished appearance, while retaining its original natural charm. Furthermore, it's a hard, tough rock, which makes it highly durable. You can totally see them building the stone in either material. Maybe the head is made out of limestone, or maybe this part of the statue is completely hollow, or else I think it would just crumble out of sheer weight, even with the iron beams. The statue's identity was revealed to us already on March 3rd, 2009 through TV Guide, when Michael Emerson said the statue was Taveret. However, that was after the episode La Flore, and he was just researching, just like us. Additionally, after we saw it more clearly in the incident, as well as this episode of Aeterno, it seems like the Egyptians combined features from other gods. Taveret is a female pregnant hippopotamus. Representations of her are almost universally rotund, as if she were with child. The statue could still depict Taveret before she was pregnant. The name Taveret is not mentioned on the show, and it first derived from Michael Emerson's theory, as well as the pop-up version that ABC aired. Later we saw the model by Jim Van Houten, described in the magazine as being Taveret. But the statue has no female breasts or a large stomach. It could be such an easy explanation as that it would completely collapse the entire structure if it was built like this. But another god that was brought into the discussion was Sobek, with his male form and crocodile face, as well as the loincloth. It could also be a dichotomy between the two, and that the statue is fused with both ideas, the male body of Sobek with the feminine touches of Taveret. Like you see, it has the hippopotamus ears, as well as the head, not being as long and crocodile-like as Sobek. Sobek is shown only carrying one ankh, while depictions of Taveret would have two ankhs. Taveret also has 4 toes. The Egyptians must have combined the goddess of childbirth and fertility with Sobek, who also represented fertility, but was the more aggressive and protective god. Sobek was associated with military prowess. I think it's a cool idea. With the increased sperm count on the island, as well as people being blessed with its healing powers, I imagine that there were little to no miscarriages, infant mortality, illness amongst newborn babies, or illnesses in general, so praising a fusion of 2 fertility figures would be natural. I also believe that this statue, being on the coast, would serve the same function as the Colossus of Rhodes, who overlooked the bay in the coastal city of Rhodes.
Excuse me, who are they? They're Macedonian slaves furnished to us by the Phoenicians.
Unfortunately, the Colossus of Rhodes was destroyed in an earthquake. I feel like the statue on Lost overlooked the bay in similar manner, where the largest population on the island was situated here, a big village that also included this area with a well. All that remains now were ruins. Additionally, we can see the head of Taveret over here. So a huge chunk of body should probably simply stick up from the ocean like this. Over the coming century, it'll drown and move further down into the ocean. But I like to believe that the top of the head grew a lot of moss and became one of these atolls that are seen on Rousseau's map, the one that the French expedition's boat got caught into, as seen here. These atolls could very well be part of the body of the statue. They're briefly sticking up from the ocean in 1988, probably just seen when the tides were low. It's quite fitting that the statue of Tavret/Sobek have played a part in 2 dramatic arrivals on the island. Let's get back to the episode. The Black Rock has landed in the middle of the jungle. Many people died on impact, including Captain Magnus Hanso. Whitfield kills the remaining slaves, but before he's about to kill Ricardo, the smoke monster comes. He kills the remaining crew, including Whitfield. He spares Ricardo, but scans him for his memories. The next shot is of that blue butterfly. Is this the smoke monster in disguise? Maybe? For the next 5 days, Ricardo will use all his strength to free himself. At some point, a boar attacks, and then later on, the smoke monster will create a scenario, including Isabella. When Ricardo is at his lowest point without any hope, food or water, the smoke monster kills the boar. He comes back to the ship.
Of course, my friend. It's good to see you out of those chains.
I think Man in Black will carry Ricardo to this area, where the bench is. Ricardo has not eaten any food for over 5 days, and would barely have any strength in him. Man in Black would carry him for a while, up to this open spot, the stone bench. You see the remnants of some structures, and I believe that this entire grassy field used to be a huge village. This is where all the Egyptians lived, those who built the statue. The same people depicted on the tapestry that either left this port or arrived here. It also works in terms of directions. Man in Black tells Ricardo to head west, and then he'll see the statue. He gives him the dagger, the instructions, and Ricardo heads to the beach. He meets Jacob, who gives him the brutal baptism, and for those of us who knew Mark Pellegrino from The Big Lebowski, this was quite a scene to behold.
Where's the money, Lebowski? You want that money, Lebowski? Bunny says you're good for it. Where's the money, Lebowski?
Jacob goes inside the statue, brings some wine, and then has a poignant conversation with Ricardo. Jacob can give Ricardo agelessness. He's already been given something to drink, and the only thing remaining is the blessed touch. This process is something we got a taste of way back in Season 2 in SOS with a Faith Healer.
There are certain places with great energy. Spots on the Earth, like the one we're above now. Perhaps this energy is geological, magnetic. Or perhaps it's something else. And when possible, I harness this energy and give it to others. May I?
The power of touch is something that harkens back to other religions and myths. You can read about it in the Gospels of the healing touch of Jesus, but also the opposite way, such as the depictions of the Grim Reaper and the touch of death. We're gonna explore this more later in the season, especially when it comes to transfer of power. Ricardo returns to the Man in Black. He's given the necklace, and then Man in Black disappears. Ricardo buries it near the stone bench. Then on the next day, and yes, I believe the episode end scene is on the next day, mainly because they both say good morning. Jacob would head down to this valley. Jacob would bring his bottle of wine.
Here. Something for you to pass the time.
Then the rest are off-screen scenes regarding Jacob. I believe that Jacob went to the Black Rock alone and buried Magnus Hanso, hence why the Blaster map says final resting place for Magnus Hanso. I doubt it would use the word resting place if he wasn't buried. The rest of the bodies would still be in their handcuffs as we see in Exodus. It's a great continuity here, with the bodies in that pose as if it's one of those who begged for mercy before getting slaughtered. I believe that Jacob would bring the ledger to Ricardo. Ricardo did not join him on the Black Rock expedition, since he tells us in Dr. Linus that he never revisited the Black Rock after he was rescued here. Then Jacob and Ricardo would work together to bring new people to the island. I would advise you to see this episode, linked in the description, which details the aftermath of Aeterno, including how Ricardo became Richard, that the Black Rock ledger was brought back to the Hanso family, as well as how North Americans came to the island, influencing Richard's accent, and the arrival of the British people, the relatives of Charles and Ellie. Let's move to the present. The group have a conversation at the beach, and then Richard will head on a long walk in the middle of the night. Hurley will follow him. A very long walk indeed. They will go through a huge chunk of the island and arrive here at the stone bench. This is filmed in a large spot near Nuuanu Drive. It's right next to the road. It's pretty crazy to see it on Google Street View, when you just move along and then bam, there it is with that iconic tree. Richard digs up the necklace. Holy Richard and the spirit of Isabella have a beautiful moment, while Man in Black Locke is nearby. That's it for Aeterno. In the next episode we'll dive into the package, but we're also going to explore a little bit of the writing, as I mentioned Maureen O'Ryan's book, exploring a little bit of some other ideas I think could have improved the show a little bit. See you then, and please subscribe for more island exploration.